Abhdhammatthasanghaha, Talk 1, Part 1. This is the first of a series of talks in which the aim is to speak of, and to enlarge upon to some extent by way of explanation, the book entitled Abhdhammatthasanghaha. It is a book which for many hundreds of years has, in Buddhist countries of the East, been considered as the one manual which, for the acquiring of a basic knowledge of the technicalities of the Buddhist teaching, should above all others be studied first. In the history of Buddhist literature, Abhdhammatthasanghaha is a comparatively modern work, insofar as it is only 800 or 900 years old. As an important work of Buddhist scholarship, and as a manual or primer of Buddhist teaching, it is, though, a book with a great ancestry and long lineage. As a summary of basic teaching, it stands in the direct line of scriptural and exegetical material, extending from the time of the enlightenment of the Buddha, by way of his teaching to his followers, then from teacher to pupil within the monastic order, and on through the centuries to the date of its composition, and from thence until the present day. As a small and incisive source of knowledge, it may therefore be considered as a kind of gem, in that within its small compass it exhibits brilliance, form, and durability, wherein by its brilliance it represents the Buddha, by its form the nature and exactness of his teaching, the Dhamma, and by its durability his monastic order, the Sangha. But first to enlarge a little upon its ancestry and lineage, to show through what channels its substance has come, and how those channels were formed. According to Western calculations, based on comparative historical research into the regnal years of the ancient kings of India and Ceylon, the Buddha attained to his enlightenment in or about the year 528 BC. On the other hand, Buddhist traditions of the Eastern countries say that the enlightenment took place at the time of full moon in the month of Vaisakha, Kason, or May, 61 years earlier than that, in the year 589 BC. The really important feature, though, which arose out of the fact of the enlightenment itself, is that it is from that time that the origins of our present knowledge of the Buddha's teachings emerge. The ministry of the Buddha Gautama extended over a period of 45 years, during which time he was an indefatigable teacher, moving about, it would appear, mostly in the more northerly parts of India, but with local traditions of his having visited both Ceylon and Burma. His teachings have come down to us in two distinct streams, both of very ancient origin, and it is those streams which form the lineage or lineages of the book now under examination, Abhdhammatthasanghaha. What are these two streams? The first is that of the basic scriptural texts, Pali, from which word the West now names the language in which those scriptures, the Tipitaka, are written. The second stream is that of the commentaries to those texts, the Atthakatha. The basic texts themselves, that is, the Vinaya, the monastic rules and history, Suttanta, the discourses of the Buddha, and Abhidhamma, the teaching expressed in terms of ultimates, have come down to us preserved and checked by the 6 councils which have taken place. The first occurred immediately following the parinibbana of the Buddha, the most recent, the 6th, at Rangoon in Burma in 1956, to celebrate the 2500th year since the parinibbana. Moreover, in addition to the recitations of the scriptures, it was at the 4th council, during the reign of King Watagamani of Ceylon in the 1st century BC, that the texts were officially committed to writing. Consequently, the author of Abhdhammatthasanghaha in the 11th or 12th century AC would in all probability have used a copy of that recension such as we do too today. That, in brief, is the first stream by means of which the lineage of the Buddha's teaching makes itself known. The second stream, that of commentarial literature, is perhaps a little more complicated to explain, because although the occasion of its earliest appearance must have been of very early date, its origins, growth, and progress through the centuries are very difficult to follow. Nevertheless, maybe a clue is given to its origin where, in a much later work called Sarata Tika, the attitude, at least of the Sangha, is shown in the following quotation. I quote, "There are indeed no items of text known as being unexplained by the Blessed One. Certainly an explanation for all was stated. From this it should be understood that the method of explanation of the three Pitakas has indeed been taught by the fully self-enlightened one. Commentary is therefore the various types of exposition originated by the Blessed One in this or that connection." End of quote. A little thought readily convinces one that the Buddha would not have taught for 45 years only in the form of statements. Much explanation and elucidation would have been essential, particularly in connection with the positive meanings we find attached to technical terms. A great many of his immediate disciples were clearly men already most learned in Vedic matters, skilled analysts and logical disputants, who, to understand fully the meaning and implication of the Buddha's word, would ask for much more detailed analysis than would appear in a basic statement. This is particularly so in the case of the strongly analytical and detailed matter of Abhidhamma, where the whole aim is to specify fundamental principles rather than to speak in a general or illustrative manner. Without going into the question more deeply, it is clear to see that whereas the Buddha's day-to-day teaching to the unscholarly was simple in form and readily understandable, the type of discourse he gave or discussion he had with those who at a much deeper level were intent on questions of moral principle, on the mechanics and functions of mental processes, on the nature of existence and so on, would have involved not only basic statement, but would of necessity have been combined with much analysis, semantics, and explanation. It is, then, in this aspect of his teachings that there can be seen much of the origins of commentary. The view given in the Sarata Tika, although late, is strong, and from that it would suggest that established tradition held commentary as indeed originally based on the Buddha's own words. That expansions of meaning given by such leading disciples as Venerable Sariputta and Venerable Mahakachana exist even in the Pitakas themselves indicates clearly that learned comment existed and was made use of at that time. That Venerable Buddhaghosa lists the names of the succession of teachers, not just reciters, who handed down Abhidhamma from the time of the Buddha till the Third Council, presupposes commentarial material by the very use of the word teacher. Such, then, would have been the origins, preservation, and growth of the most ancient commentaries. But how is it known that such original commentaries existed? This is not too difficult to answer, because both in ancient historical records and in the commentaries now existing, they are mentioned by name. For example, the Great Commentary, Maha-Atthakatha, the Ancient Commentary, Purana Atthakatha, the scripture or reference commentary, Agama Atakata. Though it should be mentioned that some scholars suggest that these are different names for the same work. In what form have they come down to us? At the time of the Third Great Council, held under the Emperor Asoka in approximately 247 BC, it is recorded in the ancient chronicles that the great Thera, Mahamahinda, took the scriptures, the Pitakas, to Ceylon. Further, in the introduction to the Digha Nikaya commentary of Buddhaghosa, it is stated that he also took with him the commentaries which had been recited at the first and following councils. It also says that Venerable Mahamahinda translated them into the Setthila language for the benefit of the islanders. From the records of a slightly later date, in the great chronicle of Ceylon, the Mahawangsa, it is said that at the time of King Watagamani, both the texts and their commentaries were committed to writing. It is most unlikely that this was the first occasion on which such a thing had been done, since writing was already in regular use even before the time of the Buddha. But it may well be looked upon as the earliest written authorized version. This would have occurred sometime during the 1st century BC. Very little more seems to have been said about the old commentaries until about the 5th century AC, when Venerable Buddhaghosa, the famous translator and scholar bhikkhu, took these old commentaries, together with the additional native Setthila commentaries, compiled since the time of Venerable Mahinda, and with some compression, in order to reduce the repetitious matter as much as possible, translated them into the language of the scriptures, Pali. These, with some few additions by other famous translator bhikkhus, are the commentaries we possess today, and which, together with some later sub-commentaries, the Tikas, form the second stream of the lineage of the Buddha's teaching. It is then against the background of these two streams of lineage, the scriptures and their commentaries, together with the very strong practical traditions existing within the Sangha of instruction and elucidation, that Abhdhammatthasanghaha was written. But now to turn to the origins of the book itself. It was written by a Thera named Anuruddha, who, it is recorded, was born in the town of Kaweri, in the district of Kanchipura in the Chola country of South India. It is said that he dwelt sometimes in a town named Tanja, in the Tamba country, also in South India, and sometimes in the island of Setthila, that is, Ceylon. He became the incumbent of the Mula Soma Vihara, an ancient monastery at Polonnaruwa, founded, according to tradition, by King Watagamani's queen, Somadevi, and a minister named Mula. It was at this monastery, at the request of one of his pupils named Nampa, or Namba, that he is said to have written Abhdhammatthasanghaha, making use of the entire Abhidhamma Pitaka together with its commentaries, and working continuously until it was complete. There seems to be some uncertainty as to the date of the composition of this important manual, some saying that Venerable Anuruddha was born shortly before or early in the reign of King Paragambahu the Great, 1153 to 1186 AC. Others, that it was written during the reign of an earlier monarch, King Vijayabahu, 1070 to 1110 AC. However, in view of there having been commentaries written on it by both a Venerable Mahakassapa and a Venerable Sariputta